Okay, so this is the third lecture that we'll have for Chapter 17. Um, and we'll start with the Family Medical Leave Act, FMLA. So what is FMLA? It's the Family Medical Leave Act, and what does it do? It requires employers with over 50 employees, i.e., 51 or more employees, to provide up to 12 weeks unpaid leave for employees when certain life events occur. All right. Um, and there is a detailed listing, but the reality is that, and the courts have tended to indicate that when an employee requests to take FMLA leave, generally if they have something that's close to um, a listing of things, the employer needs to grant that leave. Courts have been somewhat brutal to employers who have denied FMLA leave for employees who have requested it. Common things are, bad car accident and you need to recover, death or injury of a spouse, childbirth, child adoption, um, needing to take care of sick parents. All right. So all of those things will allow for an employee to take FMLA leave. Now, the thing to keep in mind, it is unpaid leave. So what does it really do? It guarantees you a job when you get back. All right, a job at the same rate of pay. All right, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have the same territory. Say I'm a salesperson and I take 12 weeks FMLA leave. When I come back, I may have a different or even less profitable geographic area. All right, but I still do have a job at the same rate of pay. All right. Your physical workspace is not protected. So if I had the corner office and I come back and I'm now in the janitor's closet, that's legal, right? As long as I make the same, I haven't been demoted. And the other thing to keep in mind is you do remain benefits eligible during the 12 weeks of leave. All right. If companies violate FMLA, and this happens a lot more than you would think, the most common um, the most common punitive action against the company is um, lost benefits, lost wages, denied compensation. So back pay, basically. All right. If you were fired, a judge can order reinstatement. That doesn't happen all that much, um, just because um, if you're ordered reinstated, you still have to work with the people you've just sued. So that isn't always the best remedy. All right. A few other things to talk about as it relates to FMLA. Um, your employer can force you to take paid time off if you have it. All right. Um, and what this does, it prevents you from taking 12 weeks leave, then coming back and taking 2 weeks vacation. All right. So if you take 12 weeks and your employer forces you to use paid time off or sick time, what it protects that employer from you being gone for extended periods of time beyond the 12 weeks. All right. Um, okay. OSHA, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Act. And so OSHA, it actually means two things. The act created the administration that goes by the same acronym. So the administration is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. All right, and if you think back to the beginning of the class, when we had our hierarchy of laws, OSHA is a federal administrative agency, which means they have the ability to write. They have the ability to write federal rules that govern how employers keep workplaces safe. All right. Now, OSHA does three things, right? And you want to be aware of these three things, all right? It has responsibility for writing rules to keep workplaces safe. It also has the ability to inspect workplaces on a scheduled or surprise basis. I mean, OSHA inspectors, from a technical perspective, can show up at any workplace during business hours and inspect the workplace, and management has to accommodate that. All right. So that's the second piece, inspections. Rulemaking, inspections. The third piece is education of consumers. All right. So if you've ever had a job in the break room or by the time clock, there was that poster, right? Maybe you never paid any attention to it, but that's provided by OSHA and is legally required to be posted. All right, and it tells you a lot of things. Usually, it's a pretty dense poster, kind of hard to read, but it basically tells you that you have the right to work in a safe environment, and your employer has to comply with OSHA law in making the workplace safe. And if you believe that there are violations, usually it has a number that you can call to report violations. And in theory, those violations will result in inspections. One part about that is that OSHA's budget has been cut and cut and cut. So they honestly don't inspect very often, right? And it becomes rhetoric, it becomes a topic of conversation when high-profile accidents occur. All right, and I'll link a few videos detailing this. One that comes to mind was, well, we've already talked about some. BP Texas City didn't have regular did not have regular OSHA inspections leading up to the explosion where 8 people were killed and several were injured. Right. In West Texas, the fertilizer plant that exploded several years ago hadn't been inspected in several years leading up to that incident. The Rhino propane plant in Florida that blew up, noticing a theme here, also had not been inspected by OSHA leading up to that incident. All right, so what really happens is that they tend to show up after something is blown up or some employee has died or something along those lines and issue fines. And that's kind of what they've done, since they don't really have the funds to adequately inspect workplaces. All right. State workers' comp. So you want to think of workers' compensation as an insurance policy that the employers have on their employees, right? But you also want to think of it as a compromise. All right. As an employee, if you're injured at work, honestly, even if it's your own fault or negligence, you're covered under the workers' compensation policy. All right. I stated it was a compromise, and it is, because if you get injured at work, you cannot sue your employer for ordinary negligence. You almost have to show, well, you pretty much do have to show that your employer intentionally or recklessly caused your injury. to sue. It is very, 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 very difficult for employees to sue their employers when they're injured at work because the state workers' compensation program is put in place to handle that. And it's a complex system, right? I mean, your medical bills, your prescriptions for medical care, but also there are mortality tables in case you die. There's a number for that, right? And loss of life and limb, blindness. There are tables that detail what all of that is worth under a state workers' compensation program. All right, compromise. If you're an employee, you can't sue for a negligent injury in the workplace. You just can't. All right, but your injury is covered under the state workers' compensation program. All right, the entitlement programs. Um, if you've ever had a job, you see FICA comes out sometimes in one line item, sometimes in two. If it comes out in two, one is typically labeled Social Security and the other is labeled Medicare. All right, so Social Security is designed to provide retirement income for workers. So it's a system that you pay into during your working years and then draw from in your retirement. That's what Social Security is. And I think it's 6.25% of every dollar earned up to 100 and I think 118.5. It's indexed, but it's around there. And then when you retire, you can draw from that system. All right. Medicare. This is a system put in place to provide for health coverage in old age, and it also applies in other instances, but primarily it's old age. And you pay 1.45% of every dollar you make during your working life into this system. All right, and then in retirement, you'll have this health coverage. All right, and these are the entitlement programs. Very commonly political issues, but they're, very commonly politicized issues. We'll hear a lot about these in the next election cycle. All right. Private pension plans. So it's not uncommon. Well, let me say that differently. Companies used to issue pension plans, which means that you'd work and a portion of your pay would be held back and paid into a pension plan. And then when you retired, you typically would have a set income amount until you died. And it commonly also would include provision for group health coverage. All right. Well, that went wrong a few times. All right. Pensions that employees had paid into went belly up. The funds weren't there for employees' retirement. And so the federal government enacted ERISA, which is the Employee Retirement Income Security Act. And what it is a set of rules that employers who offer pensions have to play by. All right, and it also created the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, which is a lot like the FDIC. If your pension goes belly up, the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation steps in and pays your pension, right? So that's another public corporation, you may recall from the previous unit, created by Congress. All right. Now, ERISA is expensive to comply with, and typically what's happened is existing pensions are still around and in compliance with it, but many companies are getting away from offering pensions at all, in that they don't, or I should say they're not offering defined uh, benefit plans. They're offering defined contribution plans. So the reality is that most of the programs that you guys pay into in your working life are not going to be covered under ERISA. They're not going to be defined benefit plans where you get a set amount basically until you die, right? Most of you guys are going to pay into plans where it's your account and you get to pick your stocks and mutual funds that are in it and manage that, and it's your responsibility to plan so that you have enough money until you die. And so that's one of the after effects of ERISA, is that very few companies still issue, still make available as a benefit to new employees defined benefit pensions. All right, but for those who do, they have to comply with ERISA. All right. Unemployment insurance, and this is very timely now because of the coronavirus and a lot of employees. I think the most recent count was 17 million in the United States who are seeking unemployment insurance because of layoff. Um, it's an insurance policy, right? It pays for lost income or a portion of lost income while you are unable to work. All right. And it's a program administered by the states. The federal government does pay into it, as do most states. All right. COBRA. And so COBRA is an acronym that doesn't really mean anything related to what it actually does. In fact, COBRA was a rider on another piece of legislation. COBRA itself, and you won't be tested on this, but stands for Consolidated Omnibus Budget Recovery Act. So this was a budget to, this was an act to balance the federal budget to prevent a government shutdown. I mean, a long time ago, right? So that's where it came from. What does it do for you if you are fired? All right. You have a right to stay in your employer's group health program. All right. And the idea here is that group health is substantially cheaper than individual health, right? From the insurer's perspective, it's risky to insure one person because you don't know what that one person may have from a medical standpoint. All right. But it's less risky to insure a group of people because all of them won't have very expensive medical conditions, right? You get to kind of average the medical cost across the whole group. And so in a group, you're going to have some really healthy people, a lot of average people, and some really unhealthy people. But it's cheaper to insure the group than it is to insure the individual. COBRA allows you to stay in your employer's group health program, right? But you do have to pay for it. And if you're fired or quit, you can stay in COBRA. The only thing to keep in mind is that you do have to pay the full payment. So let's say it costs me $400 a month to have a medical to healthcare insurance. All right. Now my employer pays $300 of that and takes $100 out of my check. All right. Well, once I go on COBRA, I'm going to pay the entire $400 and also a fee. I think it's 2.5 or 3% to my employer. Right. So it's expensive, but it's cheaper than individual health. Right. And that's the way COBRA works. All right. Affordable Care Act. A lot of complex provisions here. This is commonly known as Obamacare. We're not going to get very deep into this, but the thrust or the idea is that employers with 50 or more, right, full-time employees are required to offer health benefits. All right, simple as that. And smaller employers were encouraged to do so under Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act. All right. Employers who didn't offer these were subject to penalties that were at least equal to or greater than what it would have cost to offer the insurance to their employers. All right. So that's what Obamacare did. All right. That's all for now.